of the most critical tasks that we performed during this trip this year was the splicing of our distributed acoustic sensing, or DAS, cable. Last year, our team set out to install 2 kilometers of the DAS cable, which took a combined effort of local assistance and our full team over a 2-week period. The goal of this cable is to determine how acoustic waves travel through the ground and then to predict permafrost health based on this. After departing from Agavik, we continued to monitor the DAS cables and the data from it from our respective schools across the country. However, not soon after leaving, our cable stopped reporting data after 500 meters. This led us to believe a break occurred in the cable, as once a break occurs in a fiber optic cable, the remaining length of the cable cannot continue collecting data. During our first day on the trip, we needed to locate the break. In order to do this, we needed to follow the track from the cable installation last year and hope the break was above ground, as trying to dig up the location of the break would be near impossible. However, even following the track proved to be a difficult endeavor, as the Tundra was able to mostly grow back over the areas we placed the cable. With puddling occurring in many locations along the track, trying to pick up the track on the other side of the puddle proved to be even harder. In order to combat these complications, we had someone at the data collection point, known as the Great White, to watch the readings from the DAS. The DAS cable is sensitive enough to pick up the tracks of our team, so to find the cable track, we used walkie-talkies to communicate with the person in the Great White while we walked along the track. If we came into a tough spot, we would jump to see if we were close, as the DAS readings would spike as we jumped. Using this tactic, we were able to find the break in the cable, and luckily, the break occurred above ground, which was likely caused by the freeze thaw of the ground pushing this cable above the surface. This led us to believe the culprit of the break was a small rodent called a lemming. With the cable sticking above ground, it was likely that a lemming could have chewed through the cable, causing the break. However, our team knew this could be a possibility, so the DAS cable we had was safe for animals to consume. But finding the break was only the first challenge. In order to repair the cable, a technique called splicing has to be used.
We already spliced that other end, which is inside the tube. And now we are splicing now, and we are kind of putting together the 2 ends of the optic fiber cable. And this machine, we do a fusion splicing, and hopefully it will work.
Splicing is not easy, and in a lab setting can still take hours due to the precision and small scale that the splicer has to work with. But we did not have a lab setting for this. Rather, we had very tough conditions, as the high winds and unrelenting rain made this even more of a challenge. The only protection we had from the elements was a small hiking tent. But even so, our team was still able to get the cable spliced back together, and afterwards we put the new section into a protective box and back underground where it would be safe from the lemmings. In order to check the cable was back up and running, we called to our colleague in the Great White. During this call, we found out there was good news and bad news. The good news was the cable was fixed at this location and more of the DAS was accessible. The bad news was the readings from the DAS cable now did not go beyond the 800 meter mark, meaning still over half of our cable was not working. After finding out the next break was so close to the last, we started to lose hope that the full 2 kilometers would be working again, as we only had a week in Agavik and the splicing was taking nearly a full day in the field and we had other tasks to perform. But even with morale being a little shaky, we were still able to splice this break back together. When we radioed to the Great White to see what the status of the cable was, we found out there was another break, but it was at the 1.7 kilometer in the line, meaning it was very likely the last break being so close to the 2 kilometer mark. However, this one easily proved to be the toughest. The day we set out to do it, it was extremely cold, foggy, and windy. In addition, all of the equipment being used had to be carried to each location, meaning we had to make a 3.5 kilometer round trip by foot that day as well. After a long day's work, the cable finally got finished, and after checking with the Great White, the full 2 kilometer stretch was back up and running. To prevent these issues in the future, we walked the entire line while performing our field work to make sure there weren't any more sections poking out. We did find some sections which we were able to rebury and assure the lemmings didn't have access to them. Now, with the DAS cable back up and running along the full 2 kilometers, we have a way to continue monitoring the permafrost and advancing our research even when we are thousands of miles away.